Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the first session of the seminar titled Artist Writing, Artistic Production, The Perspective of Perspective with Julieta Aranda. The seminar, as you might have already read the description, focuses on the relationship between art making and art theory through the medium of writing. And it basically talks about, or is about, the interplay between writing and art making as two sides of what we call these days artistic practice. There's a lot to be said about that, but I just wanted to first introduce Julieta. Julieta Aranda, as you know, is an artist, a Mexican and Berlin-based artist. She's also one of the three founders of eFlux and also one of the co-editors of the journal, eFlux Journal. Her practice as an artist, I'm gonna kind of like read her bio, involves the circulation mechanisms and the idea of a poetic of circulation. Her interest on science fiction, space travel, and zones of friction, the possibility of a politicized subjectivity through the perception and the use of time, and the notion of power over the imaginary. Julieta Aranda's work spans installations, video, and print media, with a special interest in the creation and manipulation of artistic exchange and the subversion of traditional notions of commerce through art making. As a co-editor of the online platform eFlux, together with Anton Vidal, Julieta Aranda has developed the projects Time Bank, Pawn Shop, and eFlux Video Rental, all of which started in the eFlux storefront in New York and have traveled to many venues worldwide. And then there's a list of exhibitions that goes on, and I can read some of the highlights of it. Recently, Julieta showed at the Venice Biennale 2015 with a piece, Super Community, which most of you probably know about. Also, Guggenheim Museum showed one of her works. She's also showed at Kunsthalle Frida Kahlo in Kassel, an 8th Berlin Biennale, and Istanbul Biennale of 2011, 54th Venice Biennale, and many other shows. After introducing Julieta, maybe the best thing we can do is to ask you to introduce yourself. And I think the best is maybe if I start by calling your name and then you unmute yourself. And one of the things that Julieta asked me to emphasize on is maybe talk a little bit about what do you expect from the seminar and what do you expect to get out of it. So it's very important if you can kind of like, while we go through the list, kind of like gather your thoughts and have something to say about that, because it will really help the class to kind of like come to some good results at the end of the 4 weeks.
A quick aside note before people start introducing themselves. It's kind of important for me to be able to place you and to see how many of you are artists and how many of you come from writing straight up, or from a different mode, or what kind of practice you come from, and also to try to understand, because I have like quite a few very determined ideas as to what's the business of artists that write, but I want to also see if it's possible to mesh that with whatever it is that you are expecting from an investigation of artists as writers. So that's it. We can get started with introductions.
Okay, so Adam, do you want to start?
My name's Adam. I live in Edmonton, in Canada, and I'm an artist. I am excited to take this course because I feel like I haven't done anything all summer, and I look forward to hopefully some kind of a challenge towards my thinking about writing, art making, whatever. Yeah, I don't know if that's specific.
I think the names are very small, but I think it's Andrea, right? Go ahead. We can't hear you. Maybe you have to like put your volume up or do something else. You're unmuted, but you can't. I'm gonna move on to the next person, and maybe you figure that out, or maybe leave and start your browser and come back because there's still a seat available for you. So try to see what's causing you to not be able to speak. Okay, Christina, do you wanna say a word?
Sure. Hi, Mo.
Hello.
Hi. Well, I'm fascinated by the topic of, the relationship between, for me, visual and time-based media and writing, and it's been for the last 12 years or so, I've been really, really involved in this whole question of creating community for artistic practice and artistic dialogue through writing. So I've used a lot of I've been involved in online discourse, sort of organizing, editing, curating conversations. The more conceptually driven large projects that I've done across media, so that I try to always do it writing along with or enmeshed in the visual practice that I have. So this is an ongoing struggle and opportunity for me. It's an area of extreme kind of creative energy, and also really conflicted and difficult. And I'm really looking forward to. I see Julieta as an incredible master of this area. And then all of yours as well, but especially Julieta's. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay, Dylan, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Hey, I'm Dylan. I suppose that I've been performing as artist for a while through BFA. I'm driving to California tomorrow to start an MFA, but I'm more comfortable in the role of a writer, I would say. And it's sort of I end up just reading and writing way more than actually producing art. And so I've been looking for a healthy balance of that, and so maybe I can find like a cheat code through this course or something like that. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, y'all.
Helena?
But should we get back to Andrea before we speak?
Oh yeah, actually, Andrea, are you back? Go ahead. I don't think your system's working. I'm really sorry about this. For some reason, we can't hear you. Maybe quit the application altogether, like the browser. You did, right? I can read your lips, but I don't think everybody else can. So it's just mysterious because everybody else seems to be working. We'll come back to you if you can try to like maybe up there's like some buttons or thing that can help you. I don't know, volume or something. But let's go to Elena. Are you ready? Go ahead. You have to unmute yourself if you don't mind.
And Julia, you have to mute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Is that me?
No, you're good.
Oh, yeah? Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure. I was looking at something else.
You have to mute. Julia, mute yourself. Helena, unmute yourself. Okay.
Is that better?
Okay.
Yeah, it's good. Yes.
Yeah.
So is it Helena next, did you say? Yeah. Yeah? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you can hear me. Okay. Okay. So basically, I come from a performance background, and I trained. I kind of trained in performance and made work for a long time, and then kind of returned to education and did a master's at Slade School of Fine Art. And while I was there, I've always had writing as part of my practice, but while I was there, I started to work with writing and fiction as a kind of conceptual strategy, as a way of kind of creating a kind of institutional critique around the kind of institute of vision. And I created this kind of optical institute, which was this whole fictional world. It had a character called Kim Carson, who she was problematized as this kind of body, this kind of fleshy subjectivity within the kind of Institute of Art and the Institute of kind of Vision. And so I kind of rediscovered this writing practice and started to work with it kind of politically and kind of conceptually. And I guess I just want to develop that. I've just come back from a summer school with Rosie Bradotti, this kind of post-human and human summer school, which gave me loads of kind of tools. It was very philosophical, and I kind of want to find a way of like going back to art practice and thinking about art practice, performance, text, and a way of, yeah, just kind of developing that further. And I love the way that this course has kind of practical elements we're looking at into practice to experiment with writing. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Okay, Ivana. Ivan or Ivana. Ivan.
Ivan.
Go ahead. Yes.
Oh yeah, Ivan. Sorry, can you hear me? I don't know why my camera is not working. Nothing.
Well, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so I'm Avon. I just had a few little mishaps getting in here, but I'm a composer of music, basically, and I'm excited about joining this seminar. I've taken a few seminars at New Center, and it's really helped with developing writing, and that in turn helps with my work. And I also contributed something to New to Super Conversations, actually, at the invite of Jason and Mohammed. That was a little piece of sound that I made on my viola, which was a response to a piece by Keder Atria, or Attia. Attia. So anyway, I'm very glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so I guess Avon and Ivan, I sort of like similar name. I actually meant to ask Ivan. So Ivan, it's your turn now. Ivan.
Yeah.
You have to unmute yourself. Go ahead. Again, I think we have a problem. We can't hear you. This happens. Yeah, sorry about that.
Could be the sound settings of your computer, the microphone setting of your computer.
Yes, or something like that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, actually. Lovely.
Okay. Well,
we could, but then it stopped again.
do you hear me?
Yeah, you might want to take your headphone out and just speak straight to the microphone.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, but with distortion.
I will be.
Okay, I'm going to put you on mute and let you deal with the headphone.
Try to unplug your headphones, I would say.
Yeah, if you just unplug your headphone, that will be helpful. And maybe we go to Julia and then we come back to you. Go ahead, Julia. Please unmute yourself.
Hello? Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Hi. All right. My name is Julia, and I live on Quadra Island in British Columbia. And I finished my master's in fine arts a year ago in film and photography and installation work. And I've just become a curator at a public art gallery in a very rural area. And I'm kind of yearning for just learning about and reading about writing and how to change from thinking about artistic writing as an artist and sort of trying to navigate that world. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Okay, Ivan, I'm not sure if your microphone works, but we can try. Go ahead. We can't hear you. Let's see if we can try a little bit later. Let's go to Mari. Mari, why don't you unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hello.
Great. Yeah, so I'm Mari. I just became a certificate student like 2 days ago, so I'm really excited to be here. It's my first seminar. And I'm primarily coming out of an interest in where kind of law and programming and aesthetics meet. And sometimes I make work about that art-wise, sometimes I don't. But I'm really excited to take the seminar, hopefully as a way to, write really clearly about some of the more kind of insidious effects that art kind of can have on my understandings of law and programming. Yeah, so I'm really excited.
Okay, and that's okay. We're gonna go to. Go ahead. Oh my God, my eye. Just 1 sec. Mira, right? Go ahead. You want to unmute yourself? If you unmute yourself, yes. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello? Yes, for sure.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. So my name is Mirela. I'm currently based in Vienna, but I'm actually from Poland, from Warsaw. And I'm here to, I guess, develop a little bit my writing practice, but I have no concrete or big expectations. And I come actually from dance and performance, but I'm not doing that many artworks anymore. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to this experience with you. Thanks.
Okay, so now we're gonna go to Olivia. Olivia, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Olivia. I'm also a certificate student at the New Center. I'm an artist based out of Los Angeles. I've always used writing as a way to kind of write reflections on pieces that I've made and kind of make sense of them. But I guess I've never really seen it as an artistic practice in itself. And I guess I'm excited about this class to develop that. Yeah.
Okay, Robert.
Hey, my name's Rob. I'm from Vancouver, photographic artist. A lot of my works, I do a lot of research and writing before I even begin any visual work. So this kind of expansion of my knowledge on art theory and philosophy is really what I'm looking for to improve my personal works. And done a few courses here at New Center. It's really great, and I look forward to it.
Robert wrote a great piece on Laravel, which we're in the midst of editing and publishing on the && Journal. The piece was written for Tom McLean's class on Laravel. Okay, and Sam, you go next.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm basically a painter. Right now I'm a resident at Rijks Academy. And since 2 years ago I started more than ever to practice some writing, but on everything from things related to art to not related to art. So I'm very looking forward to see what I can get from the class. Thank you very much.
Actually, Sam, together with Dylan, they both did great job of helping us with responses, and they each produced at least 3, if not 4, responses in the super community. So, and that's one of the reasons they're in the seminar, because we decided to invite them to be part of the class because of their actually practicing writing and in terms of responding to super community text. So I forgot to mention that about Dylan as well, and I don't think he mentioned it. So you must be able to go back to the super community, super conversations, or through the super communities and click on the responses. I would like them to share what they wrote already on the classroom site so people can see their type of argumentation and writing and stuff. Okay, we have Nushin in the class. She's audited in the class, but since she's here, I think it's unfair to not let her kind of like speak. Nushin, do you want to like unmute yourself and
hello. Hi, I'm Nushin. I'm an artist. I'm based in New York City.
She's in the next room, actually.
I'm
So.
in the next room as Mohammed. Well, I also contributed to the super conversation on a piece a while ago. My art practice a lot of time is dealing with a lot of different mediums, so I'm not a good bound to one medium. But to be honest, usually writing has been the most challenging one for me. That I don't always go back to. But I'm looking forward to audit this class and see if I can develop my writing skills and hopefully improve. Thank you for having me in the class.
Thank you.
Thank you. One quick second, I'm going to disappear for a minute.
Maybe just try to see if you can get Andrea and Ivan. I don't see Ivan here, but we can maybe try Andrea. It still does not work.
Okay, we're missing 2 people, right? Andrea and Ivan. Ivan disappeared?
Andrea's here, but
it's very new.
But so okay, Julieta, maybe we just have to like kind of like try to like work it out somehow with Andrea. Andrea, you can also type an introduction for us on the sidebar, so then while we work it out this session or for the next session, somehow for your microphone to work. But Julieta, are you ready? Do you want me to sort of like, because I have a few things I wanted to say before you start.
Let's go ahead.
Would that be okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so as it's clear by sort of like now, the course somehow deals with the problem of writing and the problem of artists trying to write or text trying to explain art or art trying to relate to some kind of philosophy or text. Now we each have probably our own ideas about like how these two would that be okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so we got somebody here. Hello? As somebody's watching the YouTube video, and it would be good if to turn the YouTube video off, please. Somehow deals with the problem of writing. Okay, I think it was Andrea's, so I turned it off. So yeah, so sorry about that. And we each have our own idea of how writing and art relate to each other, and we're here to sort of like expand on it and learn from each other and Julieta. But for me, it really has to do with the issue of showing and seeing, and somehow how art kind of has to negotiate between these two, and how for me as a curator and as an artist, the act of writing has more to do with seeing or sharing your experience of seeing or what you've seen, which has to do with like knowledge and epistemology. Whereas art making has a lot to do with showing, which means the opposite of seeing. Not necessarily opposite of it, but somehow in the other end of the spectrum of the same activity perhaps. And how throughout the 21st century, somehow these two got conflated. And basically, what we ended up, a lot of what we ended up with a lot is artists whose work is basically a reverse type of seeing through the act of showing, rather than a genuine way of showing. So, as if somebody, like, if the allegory for it for me would be if somebody takes a tool made for seeing and starts writing with it. So I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, but for me, it's not necessarily a good thing. So some of you may actually say that's actually a very precise good thing that art sort of like learned to do in the 20th century. But I think the part of the problem of contemporary art is that the seeing and showing have been conflated through the practice of a lot of artists. And I'm sure Julieta has her own way of sort of like breaking down the relationship between writing and art making, and the relationship they have with this category of research. But maybe we should sort of like pass on the microphone and the video to Julieta to begin. And I have other questions that in the midst we can bring up. And if any of you guys want to like interject and ask question, feel free to write it on the side and tell me that you have something to say, so we can sort of like, I can see it and then ask you to unmute yourself and then interject your question. That's with a kind of a full class we have right now. This is sort of like the best way to go. So Julieta, are you ready? And I'm just gonna have to do a little bit of work because Ivan is messaging me and trying to get back to the room. So I'm gonna be behind the scene dealing with that, and I'll be with you soon. Okay, Julieta, it's with you.
Okay, hi guys. I think I'm going to start a little bit. I mean, like, I have a very big relationship with text because of editing, having edited by now 65 issues of a journal of critical writing. So that said, my relationship with text is not always friendly, and I'm very suspicious even of myself as to how and why. And I start by saying that where the suspicions come from, because that's at the core of wanting to use that as the subject for this class, or seminar, I should say. And this is, you know, like the text that we use in critical theory for art is shared, is text that is shared by many disciplines, right? We use the very same text that people use for philosophy and for anthropology, and for sociology, and for more esoteric disciplines like curatorial studies and so on, right? And what I have found interesting is to try to examine what kind of relationships do we establish to the text. And very often I find that the relationships that we artists establish to this kind of text are very predatory and really scavenging, and where we tend to use writing and add very little to it, but rather use it as crutches to propel our work forward, which I find extremely problematic. And I think that that's, and like that's in the first part. In the second part, what happens is that then artists feel the obligation of producing work, I'm sorry, producing writing that ends up being not pushing the text forward, not adding much to it, but sort of parroting, like a bad parroting of Foucault, let's say, yeah, like some kind of like really cheap implementation of language that sounds smart, that sounds philosophical, but it's really watered down. And it's precisely this belief that I mean, like, then that makes me that has made me very intrigued as to what's the relationship that artists have with text and with language. And of course, then one goes back a little bit to the I mean, like this idea that language is power, and to examine works like Joseph Kossuth, the Three Descriptions of a Chair, and whatever it is that Lawrence Wiener has been doing since he came up with the statements about work being made out of language. And that's quite nice. But that is not writing. That's just artists using language as a medium. So if wanting to get really into what writing can be as a medium, not just a description of work, not just artist statements where my work aims to show the contradictions between, I mean, like, I don't know, like just a jumble of words, but really meaningful things that can, in the same manner that, and I may say, this is different from what Mo was saying, but like in the same way that with art, when we are producing images when we are at our best, and like very strong images and powerful images that sort of enable the world to be seen differently, can text function aesthetically in that same way, right? Not in the disciplined manner that research works, where I'm going to show you facts and derive conclusions, but in this kind of like more powerful, more undisciplined way that art can do when it's at its very best. And yeah, I guess that's just like trying to lay out what's the.
Julieta, let me just rephrase something you said here that's kind of like important and interesting to sort of like so you distinguish between language and writing here, particularly as they relate to art practice, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's a type of like artist use of language, either language as pure aesthetic or like just language as language, and then there's artist writing.
Mm-hmm.
If you can break that down a little bit more, I think that's sort of like a very important distinction that probably like a lot of us might have not even thought about before.
I mean, I think that you know, like that the use of language, and it's a very empowering tool, right? It's very concrete. So I think that's starting to come. I mean, like one sees it with concrete poetry to begin with. I think like that moment which is beautiful and it's really powerful, and then one sees it in the beginnings of conceptual art. And you see it with the work of Yoko Ono, you see it with the work of, and I'm just like throwing old-timers in, but that's okay, because we're looking at it in kind of like a long lens. One sees, again, Joseph Kossuth, and one sees Lawrence Wiener. I mean, like, and even if Lawrence is very good at making epigraphs and poetic sentences, that's still not fully formed ideas. That's not real. I mean, like, he has written things, but that's different, right? Like, and then I'm trying to see other like how writing functions as really integrated within the practice, yeah, like as really not just a description system, and not just loose words thrown in a painting a la Basquiat, yeah. So like, and how writing functions not to create research methodologies analogous to the academic frames, but really images that come into their own by way of what the tool can do. I think that I mean, like, this also comes because I was a little bit preoccupied with the history of Iflux Journal, that it's something we have been doing for too many years. When over the course of time, I saw it becoming more and more academic, which is great. I really value and appreciate the text that we put out. But I started to miss this kind of different voice that is not so tied to this very precise professional system of writing. True. So I mean, like especially because I use writing a lot in my work as not as a way to explain the work, not as a description system, not as a, and I do not use my work to illustrate text in the manner of medieval monks illustrating the Bible. I mean, that's but to try to draw these, I mean, like to try to draw these relationships. And the use of writing to the aesthetic sphere, right? I mean, I don't know, when we were doing, I'm sorry, I lost my track for a second. When we were doing the super community proposal, I think it was quite important to bring these other modes of address, let's say, into the sphere of what artists can do when they write. Not trying to mimic modes of delivery, because if we try to produce research and if we try to produce philosophy, we actually produce fairly mediocre. I mean, like I have seen myself trying to write philosophical texts, and they are pretty mediocre. Yeah, like that's not really what my strengths are, and it feels always like a cheap shot to read this glutinous artist statements, and I mean, I'm sorry for calling them glutinous, but that's the way they feel, that are basically pompous collections of terms that end up saying not much about the work, but just propping it up with smarts. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, to mention an artist that I think is very, very brilliant at, or two actually, that I think in different ways are very, very brilliant at bringing language and writing into the core of what they do. And this is irrespective of the liking one may have for their work. Well, just two artists would be Hito Steyer and Liam Gillick, who are two people that have brought...
Sorry, what was the second name?
Liam Gillick. Which, to my taste, are two people that have managed to really bring in their way with words into what they do, and make them. I mean, somehow it's an awkward dance, and their practice and their work functions well. And I mean, like that's of course when one sees the writing as practice, yeah. And then of course one keeps thinking, well, what happens then? What is the function of writing within the structure of what art is at this moment? And then I go back again to this idea that language is power. Yeah? And then what happens when the artist takes the position, for example, of being the critic? What happens when the artist is who addresses another artist's work, not just his own, not just the description system for their own practice, but what is in front of us. Yeah? And I mean, that's something that I find fascinating. Two of the texts that I don't know if any of you managed to read the texts that were sent for today. There are historical texts, more or less. There are two reviews. One is a review by Smithson of Show at the Armory in 1966. Another one is Felix Gonzalez Torres' review of a Ronnie Horn piece from 1990. If you guys have managed to read them, I would very much like to spend some time trying to figure out what the position that both Felix Gonzalez Torres and Robert Smithson were taking in the writing of those texts. Mo, are you speaking?
Yes, no, I was just going to say, do you want us to go to the text?
No, I mean, like, I think we can talk a little bit more about, I mean, I'm just like trying to lay the ground for what we should accomplish in this first session. But, I mean, like, you said that you had a couple of other things that you wanted to bring up, so...
Interesting. Can you hear me? It's interesting because you almost like pointed to one of them, and it's like this moment in which artists volunteered to take on the job of sort of like writing deeply about their own work or other people's work, which is the moment of like minimalism and land art, which is basically the moment of Donald Judd and Robert Smithson, right? This is sort of like almost up until that moment, not a lot of artists had tried to sort of like go beyond addressing the surface of the work, which was sort of like doing good formal analysis and try to relate what they do to larger sets of ideas, right? And this is sort of like, I mean, this is at least this is how we were taught at the University of British Columbia, where I took art history. Sort of like the moment in which artists sort of like entered the field of sort of like philosophical writing or a kind of a deeper look at their own work and other people's work. And these are people that, at least Smithson is somebody you're mentioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about this? Because this is sort of like the beginning, right? So are we endorsing their gesture and their way of doing it, but realizing that through a form of entropy we end up with this sort of like glutinous artist statements today? What happened between the two moments?
I mean, I think that this is like the terminal condition of art, right? I mean, like what worked for Smithson, it's not a constant. It worked then, and it's temporary structure, as with anything in art, right? You do not have a mode of art that remains constant and valid throughout. So, what? God, please stop. Just 1 second. Let me get rid of one person. I'm so sorry, because this is going to keep beeping.
Helena's saying that advanced capitalism happened. So maybe Helena, do you want to like get on and kind of explain what you're saying and put it in some language so we can get it recorded in a video?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
so
you can.
I just think you know, we are in this kind of everything's for profit. Everything's been commodified in our current climate. So I mean, absolutely everything. And I think with that comes the sort of kind of sense that you are putting yourself out there as a kind of a brand. You know, competition is increased, and so there's this kind of with these horrible and you know these well, not often. Some people are, you know, I'm not going to put everyone in the same bracket, but I know myself. You know, you have a website, you have to write your artist statement, and you know it's this professionalization, this marketeering, this way of squashing your practice into some language which really doesn't say what it's actually about at all. It's a sort of form of, or can be, if it's not approached as a, you know, in a critical way, can be quite it's like a marketing tool. I don't know. So I'm just putting that out there.
So a confluence of like bureaucratic capitalism and bureaucratic academic kind of like joining in and sort of like making something that used to work for Robert Smithson sort of like not working for us today, right? Is that what you're trying to sort of like suggest?
Are you talking to me or to Elena?
No, I was actually talking to Elena, because that was like there's two sets of propositions that she sort of like put on a table, that like it's sort of professionalization and advanced capitalism as sort of like reasons why it might not be what worked for Smithson might not be working, but I think those two things kind of point to sincerity, and I think what's maybe missing a little bit is the sincerity with which Smithson would address his readers, and the sincerity with which a lot of contemporary artists today address their readers through the text they produce about their work or other people's work. But I don't know. I'm just like speaking on the top of my head.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, I think it's a combination of several things, right? You have, on the one hand, just the fact that the structures are not going to, I mean, like, what is a solid structure, it's not dogma, right? We do not want things to become dogma. I do not want the art of 50 years from now to look like what I make. I do hope that things change and move and evolve, right? So of course, I mean, like, thinking that there is change inherent to history and to art. Of course, what worked for Smithson is not going to work for me, let's say, right? I mean, and I mean, that being one thing, of course, there is also the fact that there is an issue of sincerity, because I don't think that Smithson had a lot of perspective in the sense of being able to look at an X number of generations of artists relying on text, right? He had like the advantage of dealing with fairly fresh territory and not following in footsteps. And I think that one tends to sort of to become more and more careful as to how one enters that territory the moment that there are other people occupying it. That's another thing. And that plays a little bit on sincerity, even if it is not, even if it is not always this like calculated insincerity, let's say, but it's like simply the fact that one adapts role models, yeah, and there is, and one emulates, and one tries to be like. So, I mean, and that of course shows very, I mean, it shows in painting as well, yeah, and it shows in sculpture, and it shows painfully in writing. So how, I mean, like how to free the writing from those concerns? I was quite interested in I think it was you, Helena, who were saying that you have created a kind of fiction, a kind of character, a set of characters that come in and out of your work, right? So, I mean, like that kind of use of text becomes, at least for me, quite interesting, because it's, I mean, just to mention something, because it escapes the kind of paradigms of how are we supposed to be relating to text, you know, like how am I supposed to fall into the situation is to explain my painting, yeah? I leave the work, I leave the ideology to somebody else, and at the end it is empower myself by A, not creating an ideology, and B, outsourcing my intellect to somebody else, or else like cheaply rephrasing it. So, I mean, it's so like I think like the whole point of this seminar is to try to navigate those pitfalls and trying to figure out how can we produce some text that is actually meaningful and not connected to this strategies of appropriation and of emulation and of I mean, I don't know, I end up calling it fear sometimes. I mean,
Mari, go ahead, sorry, because Mari had some words on the side plus Robert, so I was just like trying to like address those two. Maybe we start with Mari because I already called her name. Mari, do you want to kind of like propose what you put on the sideboard? Go ahead.
I can try. I mean, I put it there because I was still kind of wrestling with it, you know. But I think off of Helena's point of, you know, like writing and professionalization, I've been thinking a lot about how writing in a lot of ways offers kind of a wrapper to the work, similar to like file types, just because I'm a programmer, that's how I think. But it wraps the work itself in codes where it could be understood by others so it can move, so it can circulate, right? Like it's just enough description and labeling for it to move, for it to circulate. And the quote that I found of Roni talking about Felix's work was just such a different understanding of why you would want something to circulate or why you would want your writing about an artist to move them, which, I mean, I'm being a little sentimental or naive about. Obviously, it's not a remedy or a cure or anything, but it's a very different understanding of why to move, why to make things move, why to wrap them. And I just thought it added maybe
Do you want to read it?
less bleak. Should I read it?
Yes, for sure.
Sure. Apparently, she wrote this and then read it at his memorial. That's how I found it. That says, I am attracted to the little edibles, brightly colored candies mostly, as I partake of this metaphor that would send you around the world. I am a bumblebee who would pollinate the world with you. And thinking about the ways in which, you know, at least in classes I've taken, Felix is kind of rendered as this like very like sentimental mourner, and just this metaphor of these candies and these absences, and then reading the piece that you assigned, you know, added like such complexity to that I think I really needed and craved, without kind of fleshing him out in an arbitrary way that would take from those absences. Yeah, and I don't know, it just gave me a lot of hope for the ways in which artists and writers can partake of each other's metaphors, which again isn't like clean or pure, but it's a very different metaphor than the you know, capitalist circulation of descriptions and labels and tags and how these things move in other forms, I guess.
I think, you know, like I thank you for bringing this up, because I think this addresses something that is quite important. That is, there is a kind of I mean, I'm very interested in mechanisms of circulation, and I always have this like lingering feeling that there is something a little bit wrong in how we are implementing it right now. Yeah, there is, of course, which is to say that. And I like the idea of pollination, yeah, like that we're bringing from the quote that of Ronnie, because it's not, I mean, like circulating is not only to make something move, one also wants it to mean, yeah. Moving is, I mean, like, of course, if we go back to the Marxist equation, circulation is the implicit enabler between production and consumption, and there are inherent aesthetics to it, and as artists, it's not enough, I personally do not think that it is enough to shine a light on what was invisible before and to say, look, I got things moving, I'm circulating. It's actually what is more important is to say, yes, you got things moving, but what it is moving and where is it moving to, and what kind of agency does what bring into that process. So, I mean, how do you handle meaning? How did you not, in the effort for moving one thing from another, how did you make sure that you not end up moving Felix Gonzalez Torres and converting him into a caricature, that then it's taken by art agencies that use the images of the two lovers of the clocks to sell MasterCards, yeah? I mean, like, how do you not equate circulation with oversimplification, right? How does one keep all the meanings moving? And I think that's where writing becomes an incredible tool for artists, at least for artists that are preoccupied with this topic. I mean, I always use, this is a very, very simple example, but I always use this when I talk about the ideas of circulation, which is, I tend to refer to a bracelet for that, yeah? So let's imagine that I have, and I'm going to lay out examples because it sort of presents what I find a big problem of circulation as an aesthetic, like the aesthetics of circulation as they are widely used in the last couple of years. So let's say I have a bracelet, yeah, and I am trying to value it and trying to see how, like, what is the description system for it. Yeah, so in looking at the bracelet, I see that it's made of solid gold, 24 karat. So that is a value system to appraise this object. Then it also happens to be a heirloom. It's an object that has been in my family for all of 20 generations. So that's another value system to apply to this object, because it could be, I mean, like, that is independent from its solid gold constitution. Then I also have to think that there is a superstitious value to it, because every time an unmarried woman wears this bracelet on a full moon in the month of July, she dies a virgin. So that's yet another value to ascribe to this object. Then you also have to, let's also say that it. I happen to come from a South Pacific Aboriginal tribe, so it has the value of it being an artifact for the Western world, right? So when it's the moment to move this object, how is it going to move? How does it circulate? With one meaning, or does one actually make the effort to bring all the meanings in, right? To create complex objects, to create complex circulation mechanisms that actually can carry a multiplicity of meanings and not just a very quick shot. I mean, like, it's what good is it if everybody knows Felix Gonzalez Torres as a bunch of candy in a corner and a caricature of gay rights, yeah? that is not enough for a figure. I mean, like, how do we move in a complex manner? Then, I mean, like, I think that's a lot of why I think that writing can become one of these complexifying processes within an artistic practice, at least if it is concerned with these topics. There was something else, Mo, that you said. Somebody else, I guess Robert, had something to say?
Yeah, Robert. Robert, do you want to, like, kind of like, as someone who's worked in physics, do you want to kind of like elaborate on like the difference between a scientific paper and an artistic sort of like object or art making?
No, Robert. I think we lost Robert.
He's here, but I guess he's like has difficulty like putting himself on mute. But what Robert's saying here has something to do with what I brought up with the notion of seeing and showing. But I wish he would come back and explain it himself. Okay, so anybody else would like, Dylan, do you want to like say a few words?
Yeah, it's not a whole lot, but just this idea about sort of file types or like sort of padding an artwork within a certain type of discourse to allow it access to certain places. This reminds me also of like transfer protocol, which I don't really understand that well, but loosely it's this thing where two systems are kind of communicating. They're both expecting to see the same, like at the very beginning of the communication will be a standardized, like almost like a password or something. Basically this allows access, and then the other system seeing that line of code will then read the rest of the message, if that makes sense. So I think about, yeah, like what kind of transfer protocols allow artworks into what kind of, you know, institutional context or something. But this is, you know, perhaps not worth expanding on anymore.
I'm not sure. I think your metaphor is kind of interesting, because the minimum communication is sort of like the password, right? And then once the connection is established, then maybe more complex stuff can be communicated or something, right? Or multiplicities can somehow be simultaneously dealt with. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I hadn't thought of it like that, but I think totally. And I also, while I have the floor here, I guess I want to say that I think that, I don't know, I think that there's a certain element of like bad faith versus good faith in terms of approaching artists' writing, because I think there's a kind of conservative tendency to approach any philosophical writing as if it's in bad faith always. Or to approach any writing with bad faith and say that this artist is just pontificating, this artist is just trying to pad their work, even when it's, you know, decent shit. And so I don't know really how to like distinguish. I feel like we have a good faith critique. Like we're looking for artists that are actually doing philosophy and not just padding. So I don't really know how to distinguish between those two critiques necessarily, but this is something that I hear a lot from, I guess, from my artist peers that aren't interested in philosophy. If they encounter any philosophy, they'll just assume that the artist is bullshitting. So.
Robert, I saw you go and come back. Do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. I guess I could read that quote again. Two clear differences between a work of art and a scientific paper. In the work of art, the painter is visibly taking the world to pieces and putting it together on the same canvas. And the other is that you can watch him thinking while he is doing it. In both cases, the scientific paper is deficient, only analytic. It hides the process of thought in its impersonal language. So, with your whole question on how can we produce texts that are meaningful on their own regard, it's almost, when you're writing about artwork or seeing an exhibition, making your own thought process after being influenced by the artwork clear in the writing, whether it's creative or however, and making it not so analytic and dry and absolute is important.
I mean, I think that's actually, I mean, like, it's very good that we're bringing that up, because at the end, that's basically the goal, yeah? I mean, I'm very curious to see, and I guess that you all know what is, that there is an assignment for next week that basically consists on, rather than doing self-description, to describe somebody else's work, ideally an exhibition, but it does not have to be so just to try to see what kind of writing can we produce and how can we take it apart collectively. Yeah? But this is, this is very much, I think that because art making, it's in essence, is not, even in the most formalist of cases, it's not, there is something that, it's leaky, yeah? Like it leaks, it's not analytic, it's not a perfect system. I want to think that it also resists that kind of very, very formal analysis, and very, how do you portray it? How do you create a set of, like a system that can encompass, in terms of judgment, a painting and a sculpture and a performance art piece and immaterial whatever, yeah. Like, so of course it comes extremely permeated by let's say I don't know if subjectivity is exactly it, but it comes quite permeated by a position, let's say.
Right.
So how to make that, by a position and the position of the writer and by the position of the working time. So how to make that clear? The Felix Gonzalez Torres article, it was text. It's quite interesting because I was reading it the last days, and I was thinking that it's very funny that it's located in the 90s, because I also could, with very little effort, locate it in a month ago. Yeah? I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but it's kind of disturbing in that sense, that you're like, okay, yes, I can transpose this 20 years very, very easily. And how does that change? How does that change the text? Yeah, how does that change an artist speaking about certain things when he's talking? He's writing that at the act of time. It's before, when the NEA had not been defunded yet. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what the National Endowment for the Arts situation in the United States, which got defunded. They stopped giving grants to individual artists because Andres Serrano made this infamous piece, which was called the Peace Christ, which was basically a crucifix submerged in urine. That caused the defunding of the. So just to locate a text which is incredibly current at that time gives it a different layer of meaning. Like if we think about how it circulated 20 years ago, and how do we add that layer of meaning to it circulating today? I'm just hoping that we can try to bring these things in the texts that we will collectively produce. Not collectively, but we will individually produce and collectively analyze, let's say, over the next few weeks.
I also have this, we have not published this yet, but the artist and painter Robert Lindsay, he actually used to teach at Emily Carr University when I did my undergrad. He just completed a very beautiful essay for us for the Triple Ampersand Journal called Turning Away, and it's on basically art and mostly abstraction. And he has this beautiful sentence that says, the politics of abstraction cannot be restricted to political issues, however defined, but we do have to know what kind of art can give us a present moment, both full and unfinished. And this is sort of like the contradiction that really sort of like, to me, like both good artwork and good text about art or art writing has to have, which is both a kind of a fullness but also openness. And how to balance these two is, I think, the leakiness you were talking about sort of like deals with.
Yeah.
How to be full and be open and unfinished at the same time. So Adam, do you want to sort of like take over and talk? I see you have a note on the side.
I just, when I was reading the text yesterday, I thought that mention of the NEA was like a sudden shock. I mean, it's right in the first paragraph. It's earlier even than I remember it, but it's funny because there's this whole bit about history in it, and the rest of the history that is talked about seems like a little bit more distant or like more general, like, oh, Reagan existed, and then suddenly that is mentioned and then it's just there. I don't know. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, something that I found peculiar about that text is that, you know, like there are like tropes that we keep talking about. Of course, it mentions the 1% of people, you know, like unfair enrichment. I'm echoing. Is there something that can be done to? Okay, I think I'm not echoing enough. I hope. So just like to hear this kind of language deployed since that, like it actually made it very acute for me to realize that the same problems, I mean, like there is like a kind of like this kind of problems are a leitmotif, yeah, that they keep facing. I mean, like not only politics in general, but art in particular, yeah, like and artists keep being enmeshed in this kind of discussion, I guess, and addressing these topics. So that, I mean, like that was quite, how do you say, yeah, I mean, like, and of course, I mean, like, there's the moment when you hear, when you read about Reagan and you read about and you're like, yeah, but that happened, I mean, it was a long time ago. And at the same time, you're hearing things about, I mean, you're reading things about, okay, and so a crisis in home ownership, which of course brings to mind the financial crisis of 2008, yeah, which was all basically based on mortgages. So, I mean, like, just like this kind of thing, like, what kind of, I mean, like and again, you know, like seeing this text circulate in its currency at the moment, and in its urgency of its time, and trying to keep a balance between both things, yeah, like, I mean, like, I don't know, like that becomes somehow more and more important in my view of. I guess what writing is supposed to do and like how it's supposed to represent. I'm also thinking a lot about that and about the position of the critic and of the reviewer, because unfortunately I do know that it's an incredibly tied to financialization and speculation and art flipping. There is a lot of writing that does get, and catalog essays and things like that do get produced to prop up work, yeah, and to create, to inflate value. And writing has a lot of, like, art writing has a lot of responsibility in that. And the kind of I mean, like, this is not directly related to what we are trying to do, but it's something that happens within writing. Of course, a lot of reviews are pay for play. A lot of criticality is in the service of I would say more complicated interests. So just to think about what happens, I mean, like, no, I mean, that's probably always been the case, yeah. But then what happens when an artist takes the position of the person that's issuing this this kind of view and this kind of judgment and this kind of writing? So that's another thing that I think is quite interesting, and why I mean, like, not only to see how people describe something, but because there is a very tangible moment of empowerment within a system that takes place when one is issuing the words.
I have a question, Julieta.
Yes.
When deciding about the contributors to the super community, did you have in mind a kind of formula in terms of like how many percentage of them you want them to be artists who are going to be asked to write, and then non-artists, or it just happened that you had certain people in mind and they just happened to be artists?
I mean, as I was telling you, I think I wanted formulas. I wish I had I wish I was able to sketch things out before I do them. I never can. But like, what I can say is that what was really important for this project was to stay a little, I mean, not stay away, rather to bring into the mix another mode of address, yes, another form of speech, another way of describing the world, another So I think that's something that we did talk to people about, that they could have the freedom to not rely on academic formats and to be as experimental and I guess crazy as they wanted to be. That was, for example, very funny with Benjamin Bratton's text. Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to read that. Benjamin Bratton is a theorist that's living in San Diego and teaching at UCSD, who wrote this incredibly crazy deadpan fiction story about deprofessionalizing surgery, where there is this group of like 6 to 12-year-olds that in summer camp have a chance to perform hysterectomies on Malaysian women, but then they have a problem of figuring out how to get access to the source material, let's say, so they have to practice some tweaks. And the text is so deadpan that people actually thought it was for real. And that created a couple of very funny moments. But the best part of that is that from that text, what ended up resulting is a book on fiction. That the next title of the Influx journal also puts out books, and the next book that we're putting out is Benjamin Bratton book, and it's all fiction. So it was kind of nice to see, to spark that conversation and then to have the dialogue and to see all of a sudden this entire other avenue of writing sort of like just like come out in a dawn. Yeah, like it was fantastic.
And then I guess an opposite one would be the piece you wrote with Ana Punta, which are sort of like so it's more on the side of like it's a almost like I don't want to say academic paper because it's not academic paper, but it's not science fiction and it's not fiction, and it actually deals with a very contemporary question and problem and deals with it in sort of like real world ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, but that was interesting. I have 2 texts in the Super Community Project. They're both collaborative texts. One of them is a collaboration with a Portuguese writer, Ana Teixeira Pinto, who is very much an academic, and I mean, with whom I have a lot in common and also a lot of disagreements. So we wrote this, but that, I mean, like, I think what was quite interesting for me on that particular text is not just the format was something that we could both agree with, because that's something that she feels very comfortable with. She needs citations, reference, and open with historical grounding and so on, and that's just what she needs. So I'm okay with that. But what was very interesting there is to know that we are writing a text together from very different places, and that we are not trying to convince each other of anything, right? It's not my arguments against yours. So it's like a kind of like a disjointed text with 2 voices that still manages to produce a conclusion somehow. So I mean, like, if there is a kind of like an experimental sense aspect to that, it will be located there and not in the forum, if that makes any sense.
Yes, totally. But also your own science fiction with Brian was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a different thing altogether.
Yes.
That was, but I mean, I'm not going to get into that because we are actually reading that later, so I'm not getting into that piece.
Okay.
No, but I mean, like, I think like something to say what's quite interesting is that I mean, like, to try what was peculiar about the Super Community Project is to think that there are several ways. I mean, like, it's not just about let's write from our guts and let's forget about, you know, any kind of like rigorous analysis and so on. I would also feel really ashamed if I would pretend to be proposing that, especially considering what I do. Yeah. It's more a matter of trying to figure out how to approach it to take control of the meaning again. Yeah. I mean, like, how and to again complexify the way because there is such an incredible accelerated consumption of ideas, how to sort of kind of like armor these ideas so that they can resist corrosion a little bit longer. Yeah? And I do firmly believe that writing is capable to do that. So that's, I mean, like something that like in the I'm going to go back a little bit for a second to the Smithson text, because what I found quite interesting on that is, I mean, like he's a bit of a curmudgeon, and he's very angry about this exhibition, like this like pairing of art and technology that's taking place at the Armory in 1966, which of course is kind of relevant because there is this current pairing of art and technology and so on, right? So what he says, I mean, like, I mean, it's interesting to see the take of an artist on this kind of thing, which of course is very different from from current readings, right? But I like very much. I mean, I try to see and I try to think for myself, how has, again, you know, not only how the text, I mean, like what the text says now, but what it said then. So how does that relate to the way in which, like, how would we see this kind of exhibition today, right? Like, what is our relationship, our ideal relationship to the pairing of art and technology, and how does that enter the written world? That's also something that's quite, I mean, especially because he has quite a bit of, he has quite a beef with engineers, which I don't personally have. So that's, I mean, I would actually be very curious to know, in concrete, not so much about form, but about content. What are your thoughts on that text?
Anybody wants to take the question? If you're asking me, I personally think one of the things that like what you were talking about earlier about Smithson, we have to keep in mind is that how far engineering itself has changed from what it used to be in the 60s, and how engineers' own mind have, like, we can assume that engineers today are the same engineers as 1966, and the field of engineering, as a result of interacting with other fields and being pushed by accelerating capitalism to be inventive and be creative for profit making, has become something more interesting than what engineering used to be in the 60s, where it comes from another sort of like background, which is mostly thinking in terms of like efficiency and also sort of like anti-anthropic sort of like processes, right?
Of course, I mean, it's much less clunky. And I mean, but what I find interesting about that, and is that engineering is also its own description system, right? So, and there's like a kind of like a very rational mode of addressing the world, and of understanding and explaining the world, that is only finding its way now into, like, fairly recently, into writing, into our description systems, and into art at large. Yeah. So I mean, like, that's why I'm quite I mean, like, I'm hoping that this is something that we can take on and ruminate a little bit when it comes to producing the text that I hope we will address next week. Because, like, precisely for that, because this text, it's in a different way from how Felix Gonzalez Torres has moved through time. This shows there is a very clear difference between, I mean, like, while politics in the United States keep being the same mess that they were during the Reagan era, the relationship between art and engineering is not the same that it was when Smithson was writing. So how does one think in terms of discussing a description system that now has come to be seen as fully formed, and not just, oh, an engineer builds bridges, right?
Well, you know, I'm gonna Sam, if you're around, you know, I'm really interested to also hear. I know you're quiet, but because of the type of like work we do with each other and the conversations we have with each other and the knowledge I have of your work, and Sam, you're with us, right? I hope you're there. It would be great if at some point today you would address the question, because the kind of work you do is sort of like it's a double type of work, because you also do a type of transliteration, because you read and are interested in a lot of classical but also modern Persian text, and you try to bring that into your paintings. Literally bring them into your paintings, right? Whether they're book covers or they're phrases or they're sort of like idioms or concepts, right? So it would be great if you can somehow sort of like address this question from that type of experience.
Actually, all the time I'm thinking about how to relate things that I'm hearing to the type of the work that I'm doing. But I think you should know very well as well my first language is Persian. Your first language is Persian too, I think. And the way that in Persian, being as one of the 4 classic languages and the only classic language that is being spoken by a nation and is being taught in the school and being used daily, it's not very much anymore about the text that you get, which is extensive amount of poetry and 9 centuries of things that you can read every day and you use daily. But the context in which that body of text is produced, and it has, well, I mean, to put it very shortly, I think the way that that context is working not only in Iran, but for all the Persian speakers and Urdu speakers and Turkish speakers and many of the different languages that are spoken in India, that I don't know if anyone in this audience is speaking any of those languages. It is not anymore the matter of the text, but the relationality between the body of the political and aesthetic and ethical and artistic is totally different from the Western world, yet informed enough about the Western world. So, I mean, it's now 4 years that I'm living in the Netherlands, and the rest of my life I have lived in Iran, and I have been speaking English and Persian since very early ages. But what is becoming more apparent, more than ever now to me, is that well, that modus operandi, that context, that relational, that mode of relationality that I'm speaking of, has been changing so dramatically since modernism has been introduced to the Persian culture and to the Iranian audience, but it has not changed the very fundamental of that relationality. Well, I do not know how much people are aware of those relational modes, but what I have been busy with the past 2-3 years has been that thinking about that context, I cannot just simply make a European painting or just simply continue writing something in Persian in the context of the classical language or something in English. And I have been working as an industrial translator, and it has been changing towards non-industrial translator. But you know, I mean, there are a lot of questions that I have in my work, my studio practice, in my daily life regarding writing and reading and literature and literary. That I think this last contribution we did together, you put it very in a very strong manner. You summarize it all together. It's more about the context in which one is dealing with that, I think, and the translation to another context, namely being the Western European, North American, highly dominated by capitalism and Protestant Catholic ideas of Christianity, Judeo-Christianity. I don't know how the rest of the group relates to that, but I will be elaborating more if I know which direction.
You know, I mean, but Sam, what we're talking about it's again on the direction of this idea of complexifying, right? I mean, like this, like to go back a little bit, of course, this comes from the sense that not only language is power, but description systems are power. Yeah? So, of course, there is a kind of an unassumed set of obligations and modes of description that come with an art practice and that are incredibly Western, but they don't. I mean, like that's they don't always have to be. And I find, personally, I'm Mexican. I find it like really forced to either find myself having to make European work and European writing, or trying to put on my typical costume and produce Mexican modes of address. Yeah, like I find both situations very problematic, and I think what's more interesting is to add layers. Yeah, not to take on single positions, but to add layers. Something that comes to mind is I've been a science fiction buff my entire life, so I keep following the Hugo. I don't know if you know what the Hugo Awards are, but it's like one of those. It's kind of like the big deal for science fiction that are awarded every year. And this year there was like a very, very big sting, yeah, like a really, yes, exactly, a lot of, because there were, of course, these like two groups, the sad puppies, I guess they are called, sad puppies or whiny puppies or rabbit puppies or something or other puppies, yeah, like two groups of people that were very upset because all of a sudden science fiction was being co-opted to discuss feminism and gender, and not the kind of typical colonial colonial stories of the hero that goes and shoots the bad green guys, more or less. And so they were proposing like a ballot that included mostly white male. And I mean, it was very complex, and it was like as Adam was just saying, like a lot of jokes and a lot of very funny writing this past week. But at the end, the winning novel was a Chinese writer, Liu Cixin, that wrote a beautiful novel that's called The Three-Body Problem. And of course, what happens there is that all of a sudden you are reading science fiction from an entirely Chinese perspective. And you realize how all of the frame of reference for this one particular literary genre has to change. Because we're entirely used to receiving, you know, the only people that see UFOs are in Texas. It's all of a sudden, like everything shifts, and that shift, for as small as it is, somehow highlights how entrenched this like single simplistic description model is. Yeah. So I mean, like I think, I mean, like I find that, I don't know, I mean, like I think a lot about that when it comes to thinking, to bring it back into art writing. You know, what is a review? What's the purpose of what's the purpose of a review? What is that supposed to do? What does it? I mean, it's a description system. From what angle is it? According to which parameters? What is being described? Who is being the description? Wherein is the power of this text? I find that very fascinating, and it's normally not, and like artists they tend to have a very passive position in this situation, in the same manner in which they don't or we don't get involved in the sale of our work. We don't get involved in the description of. I cannot see that. I cannot see what you're saying. Okay.
Adam, maybe you can say it yourself.
I know that. Oh, can
Adam, do you want to describe it?
Yeah,
the review?
no, it's really neat. The thing that happened at the Hugos was the two groups that were called Sad Puppies or Rabbit Puppies had prepared slates of works that they wanted to be nominated for the award, and in several categories they got enough people to vote for the same 5 choices to be nominated that nothing else could be nominated. But in this category, in the best novel category, one of the people they had picked was like, I don't want to be part of this, it's awful. And so they withdrew their vote, which allowed the Three-Body Problem to get on the ballot. And then one of the leaders who had caused this was like, oh, we should vote for that one anyway. Like, in this like just split second before he went back to his like his official one and started to declare victory or whatever, he said that actually they should change their vote to the one that they had almost prevented from being involved in the whole thing at all. But because it is from this totally different viewpoint. It was until he saw it on the ballot, he didn't know how to fit it into his, because he was all about like picking conservative choices or picking anti-SJW choices or whatever. So he didn't know how to process this work, I guess.
So was it a real change of heart, or it was political?
You can't tell with that guy, so I don't know.
I mean, I think at the end, because it's a group of writers, and the Hugo Awards are fairly serious for the genre, I think people do end up, at some point you have to say, okay, but you know what, like that is fantastic writing. And I mean, like I found that very, very interesting, because of course, like that somebody can go back into their words and be like, no, okay, I'm going to, I take that back. Let's give it up to the Chinese guy. Yeah, I that's.
The puppies peoples are really like, they're obsessed with an idea of good writing. I mean, it's a lot like reading that Smithson piece. It reminds me like of a lot of terrible sculpture and painting conservative art dudes that I know who are like the cousins of the sad puppies in the art world, maybe, and they're always obsessed with the idea of quality, like, and so that's part of what makes it maybe difficult for them to process.
Quality and there is purity, yeah, and like there is like something which ends up as one of those things that has to do with like judging formal production and so on, which is why I find, I mean, like, and the way in which a lot of this comes out is in the review, yeah? In the critical text. So that's why I'm very interested in trying to see what can a review be, like what kind of description systems can we think of to discuss work outside of our own, not to describe ourselves, but to describe something. I'm hoping, and that's also the reason why we are discussing, why I brought up both a positive and a negative review, because I hope that we can use description systems both for the good and for the bad, both to bring up the qualities of something that needs to be brought up, and also to tear something apart that needs to be turned down.
I was gonna say something, Julieta, about this incident that you guys mentioned, and also related to what Sam was almost trying to say, and that is, it's not that like the sheer novelty or like uniqueness or freshness of what is in the science fiction written by a Chinese writer that sort of like works in favor of it in such a context, or it's not like the uniqueness of the kind of Persian context that, say, Sam's able to bring to the table, but the fact that somehow intentionally or unintentionally, what is being shared here resonates with a global or Western or Northwestern sort of like dominant worldview, right? That it resonates. So then this transcultural I don't know, translation can actually take place, not because one side is exotic, but because something that's unique on that side finds a way to sort of like appeal through the other context, finds it appealing because there's something that sort of like resonates, or there's something that, like, for whatever reason it is, direct or indirect, right? So, and I see that a lot when the way Sam works, and I've seen Sam does this in his studio in Rijksacademy. I've sat there, watch him do this, right? It's like he finds something in some classic Persian text by Sadi or by some other even more obscure writers that I don't even know myself, and then he finds a way to relate that to something that's very urgent in the art discussion or in philosophical or political discussion of the day, in sort of like a global discourse. And then he finds a way to relate the two, and he gets all excited, and then he starts working around it and polish it, and then works it into ways in which these two things all of a sudden start sort of like relating. Am I right, Sam?
One thing that I think is necessary that I add is that yes, you're right, and it is that the art practice and the research practice, they inform each other, but they never become one, except that there is also a third space of painting, and while painting and looking at the painting history and art history, there is knowledge and sensibility generation that every artist finds a way to express either in the artwork, or if it is not art and it is more of a research, you will bring it somewhere else. But I think one of the very important things that I forgot to mention is that I just give you an example. I'm very much concerned about the situation and the subject of crucifixion in the history of European painting, and then later any painting which is Christian. But, you can even find it in the Eastern Christian churches and decorations and everything. And that was always in my mind, like, how on earth that is so central to the painting tradition, or to the whole visual tradition. And on the other hand, well, Persian is now, for 9 centuries at least, an Islamic language. So there is another narrative of crucifixion, the non-crucifixion in Islam and in Persian, in Arabic, in Persian, in Turkish, in Urdu. And I never found anyone who has been making a comparison, visual comparative writing or painting on this issue. So I took it up. I picked it up and I continued. And I had to be a researcher and a painter sometimes. You know, I mean, it is like one foot goes for research, one foot goes for painting, and then I need to do a step by step. You know, like, I don't know how to explain better because I'm just in the middle of it. But maybe that's what you also wanted to explain.
Sam, maybe explain what do you mean by non-crucifixion, because.
Yeah, well, I mean, I will complicate everything that I said by adding psychoanalysis to it, because, well, I think that is even more central to what I do than Persian literature, or I don't know which one is more, or painting. But throughout reading Norman O'Brown, which has this very classic Life Against Death, he goes to make a psychoanalytic understanding of history, being a Marxist Freudian classicist of 60s, 50s. And there he gets to the point of the importance of anality, homosexuality, Protestant era, and capitalism and everything. Then I realized that he has written another book on the challenge of Islam, where he gets to the point of, guys, there is a third religion, Abrahamic religion, that has its own narrative about crucifixion. Muslims, Quran, the holy book narrative of crucifixion is that Jesus Christ was not crucified. It only appeared to us. And the word appear becomes this very central core idea of the spectacle culture of Islam and Judaism as well. So there, a lot of other things happen. I cannot summarize it here, but very central to that is that there are 2 trends in the early Christianity that is also followed up in Islam. One is Gnosticism, the pre-Christian, and then it is continued in Christianity. And the other one is the Docetism. Docetic, or the Acts of John in Christianity, is exactly in line with the narrative of Islam on crucifixion, which is that Jesus Christ was not crucified, therefore there is a political importance given to the humans who were supposedly evil, who wanted to crucify Jesus Christ. It's not just that God reincarnated in the body of his own son and killed him thereafter. It is that it appeared to us that he is being crucified, and it was us, ourselves, that were going to crucify him. So you see that he is trying to take up phenomenology by reading of Henri Corbin and Mullah Sadra and Sohrawardi and Ismailite sects of Shiism and Shariati, so many people that he brings in, and he writes this in the 80s, and I see, well, this is the most relevant thing in my life, at least in Europe, in relation to homosexuality, to capitalism, to too many things that I even do. But then, you know, the frustration that probably I'm dealing with is, or I'm failing to deal with, is like defining and explaining this very complicated network of the context which makes a different version of everything which is related to Europe but yet is not European is very much more difficult to deal with than, for example, Indian or Chinese, because then Islam is not one of the or one of the other. It's just like it is not indifferent. It is different. It is different from European yet too related. And I do not I or many people fail to find a third space which is neither Islamic nor Persian nor European. You know.
Yeah, no, again, you know, like this is the point of like trying to keep complex meanings, yeah, like to not have the, I mean, like it's much easier, of course, to circulate the image of a crucifixion if you give it a Judeo-Christian reading and you say, okay, and this is what it means, and let's move this around and to move it around, we're going to forget every other meaning it has had. And these are the ways of history. So if we're trying to think in terms of like keeping meaning complex, yeah, like assuming that things are polysemic, that they can carry many. It's not the vehicle for a single thing, but they can carry several things. They have plenty of arms. It's possible to be generous with ascribing several meanings to objects, to paintings, to things. I mean, like writing is, and again, you know, like then that's when I default to writing, because I think that's one of the best ways to armor images against instant simplification. Yeah? And I mean, like, and I think that's also why I think it's important to enter as artists. I was quite pleased to see that we are so many artists in this group, because to take the role of the one that is describing, yeah? Not describing ourselves, but what it's like to describe the world, what it's like to create yet another. I mean, like one could argue that the critics use arbitrary systems. So what does it mean? What can we do by taking displays? Yeah, I mean, and I actually am very curious to. I mean, because of course, criticality and description create avenues of circulation. Like as Sam was saying, in terms of like, so how do we end up reading the image of a crucifixion? Yeah, like how do we end up giving exaggerating the value, not the value, but the weight of a religious imagery, of religious meaning over a set of imagery, yeah? And preventing it from representing anything else. So this, I mean, like to keep representation more open, yeah. Like this third way that you were talking about. I mean, how can it be produced not only through images but through text, through descriptions of the world, and that's. I mean, I'm going to leave you for all of 2 minutes because I need to go to the bathroom. But when I come back, I think it would be interesting to try to discuss for a second what do we think is the potential of writing critically, of like describing things that are outside of ourselves, in that case, artworks produced by others. So I'm off for all of 2 minutes.
I'm gonna just explain a little bit more on this non-crucifixion thing, because I think most people still don't understand what Sam meant, but I can tell that to you later. You can do whatever you're doing. So basically, what's important to mention here is, like, it appeared to us, what Sam means by appeared to us is that Muslims believe that Romans basically crucified the wrong person. A different person was crucified as Christ. So it's not like that it was a holographic experience that it appeared to us, but that an unknown person was captured. Or actually, there's some sects of Islam believe that, like, God saved Jesus and put somebody else up there. Or actually, Romans captured the wrong person and they persecuted the wrong person, thinking that that's Jesus. And then Jesus lived his life in clandestine, and just like with Mary Magdalena, and they had like children and everything went just fine. and he died that way, and then the other person died in place of Jesus. So this is sort of like the non-crucifixion thing that Sam's talking about, right, Sam?
Ironically, the person that Quran believes that was crucified instead of Jesus is Judas, which is quite very also intriguing. But the other thing which I find very interesting is that, well, I mean, this notion of this hijacking the crucifixion story and changing it, like twisting it to something else. The way Brown tries to explain it is that it wants to bring us to brings us back or forward to a different way of reading it, not reading it too concrete, not reading it literally, but reading it literally and symbolically, and like because when you read, I mean, you even do not need to go to what Muhammad has written in Quran, but to the Acts of John, where he says, there is a text which is very, very beautiful text, which is not a part of Bible, but John has written it, Saint John has written it, which is like in a different fashion, he tries to explain that Jesus was not there, he suffered, yet he did not suffer. He was on the cross, but it was not the cross, but it was the cross of the light. It was, you know, that is quite very fascinating. I think if one wants to take a look at that, it opens up a new way of not only thinking about crucifixion and Christianity and its relation to Islam, but looking at Islam as a social criticism, which is just like another city management, another way of political management, another way of aesthetic management, or and also that I think Muhammad agrees with me that when we say art, for example, in the context of Persian or in Arabic, we do not mean only visual art. We mean poetry. We mean even a good politician can be called an artist. You know, these things I think are manifestations of that different modes of relationality that, well, makes it difficult for me to write in Persian or English, because also the dinosaurs of Persian language make it very difficult to deal with, like all those summits of Persian language doesn't let one easily dare to pick up pen to just like write whatever, you know. I don't know how Muhammad relates to that. You can maybe.
No, I totally agree. But you know, another thing that we forgot to do was like go back to Ivan, but also Santiago and these two fellows who are in the class, and also Andrea. I recognize that Andrea's issue was like not resolved with the microphone, but Andrea kind of got a chance to type on the side who she is and what she does. So Ivan, you messaged me and said your microphone works, so do you want to like take over and sort of like introduce yourself before we continue on? This is a good moment maybe when Julieta took a break.
She's back. Try? Julieta is back.
Yes, I see you.
Okay. Hi. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, just presenting myself. I studied music, but I've been doing also a bit of painting, drawing, and writing. But I'm related to the writing part in the academics, doing my master, and I am trying to do my doctorate. So the way I write is in that context. But when I am composing or creating anything, it also comes with a bit of words, and words are very say some other things that the work itself doesn't. So I very interested in make the things that are outside the work when it is presented, being integrated in a way not like something outside the work, but within the work. Well, the way you're talking, well, the things that you're saying in these contexts of reading or writing about some work of art, I resonate with some things like this context that you were saying, like a Mexican said, Julieta. I also feel this. I don't belong to the Western world like that, but I don't belong neither to the native world of Mexico. But we can. I think we like cross this way of reading anything that is happening, in particular works of art that.
I think, I mean, there is, I mean, but I think that's something interesting, right? Of course, when, I mean, and I'm going to go back a little bit to Sam, because Sam is saying something about the difference between functioning in Persian or like in terms of like what writing is and what poetry means and what text means, and functioning within a Western context. Of course, something happens which is also like to be mentioned, is that the moment that you have to function and to use description systems that come in a language that is not your own, and in a kind of with a kind of context that is not your own, you are already faced with this. I mean, I don't think. I mean, like, it's not necessarily something to bring up, because I think that the vast majority of the people in the room, let's say, are English speakers. So there is not so much of this. I don't know if struggle is a bit too much of a emphatic word, but there is something that happens. I mean, for example, I find myself not able to write in Spanish. It's absolutely ridiculous, because very often I have to go and talk in Spanish, but then I have to write in English and translate myself to Spanish, because I like that kind of I don't have access to text in that geography. Yeah, my text is only in English. And I find that quite interesting as a relationship to something. When you are a monoglot, you don't really, I mean, you don't really face that. But that's also, I mean, like, it's interesting, like, again, because the description system is not only the text itself, the writing itself, but the language in which it's written, which is also what makes me create the difference between language and writing. It comes both from the order of words and from the language in which they are spoken, and then there is the meaning that they are given. If that makes any sense. I'm not trying to make that into a large part of the seminar, because I don't think that we are trying to discuss language politics, but rather the power of description systems, let's say, and of creating and inhabiting certain description systems. But of course, I mean, like, there is this like sub-layer which plays on what we were discussing earlier about the Hugo Awards, yeah, like what happens when all of a sudden other description systems that are coming also from a tacitly from a different language, like how does that enter the dominant model? Yeah, like it's. I mean, which again, you know, like that's why I'm interested in positioning ourselves as critics, as having the power to describe with this kind of authority, let's say, that is, you know, that this kind of text confers. I mean, like, I think that's also, like, that's a position that I always find, because it's also quite convenient for a certain, let's say, for the larger economies of art, if artists are not so involved in the description process. I think that's really. It makes the process of domestication a lot easier.
If the artists are not allowed
if the artists are not allowed in the establishment of descriptive system, you said?
Yeah. So that's, I mean, like, that's why I'm very interested in closing that, in having in sort of like inhabiting that spaces, in like create, I mean, like participating in how this, because it's a way of currency, you know, like what's created by these description systems that are modeled as reviews, as criticality, as this very particular kind of writing. Yeah, like it creates currency for work. So what it's like to be not on the side of that who is described, but that who is making the description.
That who describe it, that's who make the description.
Yeah. That I think it's a very I mean, it's like I think that's I'm incredibly curious to see what comes out of the. I mean,
I would have said something about like art and philosophy there, but like I've been also trying to squeeze Santiago in because he joined us a little bit later,
yes,
and we never got a chance to hear his sort of like introduction and what he expects from the course, because he wasn't even there when we asked everyone to sort of like introduce themselves and say what they expect to receive in the course. So Santiago, are you ready to sort of like unmute yourself and maybe talk for a minute?
Yes. Hi, how are you, everyone?
Hello.
Well, I'm Santiago Piñol. I am based in Bogota, Colombia, and right now I'm part of an office for art projects that's called La Agencia. And right now we are curating one of the national local saloons, which is an institution here that happens once every 2 years. And I think you've heard this story before. We're doing an art school. So we transform what was meant to be an exhibition into an art school, therefore like not producing any sort of objects, not making any type of exhibition, but rather just making a space and creating knowledge and moving around agents for the arts and cultures of Colombia and also international. We recently had Martha Rosler with us here in Bogota. We also had Monica Hoff from the Bienal de Mercosur, Sophie Goltz from Hamburg, but those are like the international ones. But also, one of the things we changed with the art school, that's called Garage School, Escuela de Garaje, was because here they divide the country like into 7 parts, like Bogota being the center of the country. We defied that definition, that political definition of what was meant to be the center, and we just created a fiction of art and education as a territory. So we were traveling around Colombia looking for artists who are working in the expanded field of art and education, and through that we also were able to structure the school around the subjects we found, so to say. And so in a way my expectations with the course are around the idea of appropriating the sites of production of meaning, of legitimization, like in this sense from education, and through the creation of theory or hypothesis, because I don't know if art can create theory or only hypothesis, you know, the difference between science and humanities and what is theory and what is an hypothesis and so on. And yeah, I think that's basically it.
Thank you. You're the last one to do this, but I think it's important for people to know whatever everybody is here for and what they do. Now, in sort of like relation, now I want to like address that what I was gonna say, which is sort of like the emphasis that Julieta made in the beginning about like artists not like artist writing. Basically, I think that's what she meant, is that artist writing is not kind of like a form of philosophy, right? But I truly think that there is a relationship between art making and philosophy, in that good art
good art, and not always, not all good art, or is not sort of like a requirement of art to be, but but some good art or some art, when it's successful, is a form of direct philosophy, which is not necessarily language based or based in words, right? And it somehow short circuit the writing and goes from being a mere image or an experience of an image, or just simply an experience of time and space, which is sort of like being in a gallery or being in a space where it's for art, to directly to a set of discoveries or understandings about how the world functions, but without going through becoming language, and then language becoming an image again, and then image becoming language again for the, I mean, I went through the artist all the way to the audience, right? Then language becoming an image, and image becoming language, and language becoming knowledge for the viewer, right? And shortcutting all that and going straight from something that's an object or an experience of an object or image into direct philosophical knowledge. And some good art does that, and I value that in art. And I don't want to foreclose the idea that some artists are a kind of special philosophers, and some art is this form of sort of like, I don't know if direct is the right word, but just for the lack of a better word, and to reduce it for it to be communicated or circulated, direct philosophers or direct philosophy.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, that there is actually, I mean, like, there is work that can be and is like so incredibly precise, I guess, that it can and precise in its intent and precise in its rendering of meaning, that it can bypass a language and a description system and just sit on the top of your head and do it, you know, like and then be described, in turn be described, yeah, and then one has to grapple with, okay, so how are we going to describe this? How can we? And this is not to say, I mean, like, this is, I don't think it's an obligation for artists to create description systems in that sense, but rather to investigate the kind of, like, on the one hand, the kind of power that comes from entering that space, not necessarily in relationship to one's work, but simply in relationship to the writing of the book, yeah. And on the other hand, like, what kind of armoring, yeah, like, and I think of that, like, I think that good, like, this kind of, like, good writing, like, describing your own agency and describing your own meaning becomes like armor, yeah, like the kind of way in which you can prevent the work from being so easily consumed and so easily transformed into this thing that it is not. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was like saying that one, like, I used to have this to say that I wanted to have a moratorium where people that work for advertising agencies were not allowed into museums for the next 5 years, because that's when you end up seeing things like the Two Lovers, yeah, like the Felix Gonzalez Torres clocks all of a sudden into a MasterCard advertising completely devoid of meaning. So that's, I mean, like, like, what does it mean to, like, how can you armor that image, that that perfect object, that really, how can you armor it so that it does not get consumed and corroded so quickly? I mean, like, I think there is a kind of power that one can take upon oneself to do that.
But what is interesting, because what you're saying is so different than how artists are coached into writing artist statement. Like of course, I'm talking about the normative, so like, yeah, the normative one that they get in MFA program, which is like, write your descriptions in ways that you actually disarm the art and you allow curators to connect it to as many different contexts, because you allow it to be in so many different shows, or attract so many different curators. Because if you armor it,
course. I mean, like, but that's when you make. That's like making. I mean, like, and that's of course there are advantages to that in a kind of like practical sense. What you want to make is work that is like the equivalent of elastic waistbands, one size fits all. But if one is like trying to think in terms of actually having agency over meaning, to create a description system, and of course there are always, I mean, like what's fantastic about good art is that there is a set of readings, and then there are always going to be additional readings that were present or inherent to the work and not into that original description system, right? So, I mean, like, that's not something to worry about. If the work is good, you know, like, I mean, like, it will find its way into the world. I mean, like, of course, that sounds like a statement of faith, and that's horrible to say, yeah? But that's not as horrible as it is to say, okay, I'm going to make something that can fit in, you know, like make a description so that my work can fit in a show about work, in a show about science fiction, in a show about the politics of gender, and in a show about cats. I mean, like, I think that's much more problematic, and I mean, like, in those kinds of like very bland ways of presenting one, like, I mean, like, that plagues. I can't even call it writing in good faith, you know, like but that plagues the production of text by artists. I feel also, and like, and maybe another reason to do this is because I feel a little bit guilty, of course, because of doing e-flux. I feel partially responsible for the proliferation of the bad press release.
You feel that?
That there are many bad press releases, of course.
Oh no, they know that you're responsible, or as partially responsible.
I mean, like, I feel that I have had a hand in circulating a lot of shitty writing, yeah.
Circulating it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and not in a direct way, of course, fostering its proliferation. Yeah? Where, I mean, like, it's like a little bit of an echo chamber when all of a sudden you see that that there is a need to describe in this very particular, using this very particular system that is not necessarily the best one. And how can these models be reactivated? Like, how can one explore this writing? And it's not about being quirky and sounding smart or writing from the guts. I mean, like, again, that's not really the most important thing.
Two texts that comes to my mind, of course, is International Art English, that was published by Triple Canopy, and then Martha Rothler Response in eFlux Journal. And I think I would put both of them on Classroom later on. And I think in this context, it's very important to read these two texts together.
I really should have brought it up. That's a very, very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, because, like, you know what I mean? Like, they give you the problem, and then Martha kind of like qualifies it, and so like historicizes it and talks about where it comes from, and also points to the problems that are inherent in that type of criticism of International Art English, the criticism that International Art English proposes, right? And I quite enjoyed both of those pieces, actually. We only have about 20 minutes left of the class, so I think you know, and it's the first session, so I thought maybe going over, like, letting people ask some question about the because everybody here is enrolled, right? And everybody here, I hope, is intending to actually, like, pass the seminar and sort of like fulfill the requirements. And I think that people might have questions about requirements, and maybe Julieta want to say a few words about how she expects you guys to do the requirements. And then also, like, the fact that, like, some of you have not received the Classroom code. The Classroom is basically like a exclusive blog type on a Google technology that we adopt and use, which would allow you all to sort of like download the text. I'm going to put the rest of the text because we just received the material for the second session. I'm going to put all the material, including the first week, there, and then the assignments can be uploaded there, so then Julieta can download and read them. And basically, the rest of the conversation from here can continue on throughout the week over there. People can communicate with each other, and whenever Julieta has time, can also go there and kind of keep an eye on what's being said and add stuff. And it's also a great place to add links and resources as you find them, find interesting text or problematic text or whatever, you can add it there, and it all gets recorded there, and it won't disappear after the class ends. It's just going to be there and whoever subscribes to the class forever will have access to it. So it's a great place to continue the conversation and keep all the resources and the assignments and the syllabus. So yeah, so Julieta, do you want to like begin with people asking questions about requirements, or you have some general statement to say about the requirements?
I mean, well, there are two requirements. One, it's the first is to make the writing of, as I mentioned several times already, like 1 or 2 reviews of current exhibitions, or if not current exhibitions that you have seen in person, or works that you are quite comfortable describing and discussing and being critical about. Either, I mean, like if I mean, like I would be like the reason to ask for 2 of these texts is because I would be quite interested in seeing both a positive and a negative description, and like how does it operate to actually work to write of something in positive terms and in negative terms. Like, what comes up? What kind of descriptions do we use? How does that enter? And that's, I think, that's going to keep us busy for next week and maybe a little bit of the next one, to try to go over the texts and see why. I mean, and ideally you would be able to provide some images of what it is that's being described, so we don't have to take only your words as a way to create a visual for this. The second requirement is longer, and that's actually something that should be ideally related to your practice. And it's, again, not a description of work. That's incredibly not interesting, right? Not to say my work means or aims to describe or aims to discuss the contradiction between formal abstraction and kittens. I mean, like that's fluffy and that's not so interesting. But actually, to try to see how, in a more essential way, what the work is. And I'm thinking of something. I mean, originally I had said 3,000 words, but we are very many, and I think that's a bit ambitious. So we can leave it at like 1,000 to 1,500 words. I think that should be enough to make a case that can be analyzed. In terms of reviews, I think it's possible. I mean, like there are word counts, and I think that's actually quite important to try to keep within a certain parameter, especially because for the review, the reviews would be between 500 and 700 words, and the personal text, let's aim for 1,000 to 1,500.
I recommend that if Julieta's asking in the syllabus requirement to have the reviews to workshop around the seminars, try to do them for the second and the third seminars. So next week and the week after, right? Is that good? So then
that's ideal, because I would like us to be able to discuss this text. I mean, and to focus on what are the descriptive choices that we are using, and because that, I mean, there is also something is going to come up. Yeah, what models are we using to talk about things? It's not only the things that we choose to talk about, but how do we talk about them? And these things are going to come out in the text. I can only be very abstract and gloss over things and completely speak about Smithson and Felix Gonzalez Torres, but that's no fun because those guys are, you know, like sitting on the clouds, so that's not so much fun. But I think like some of the things that Sam was talking about, I think, are going to come up when we see what exactly are the methods that we use to describe work in the face of the work itself. Yeah, like, I mean, I think it's important that you not only provide the reviews, but the samples of the of the work that's being described. I think, Helen, that's up to you. I would love that. I would very much like if you guys are willing to share your work with each other.
So yeah, so post it before the seminar, at least 24, 48 hours before the seminar. So basically, by Friday night or Saturday morning, post it. Then give everyone 24 hours to read them. That would be great. If you can do that, that would be lovely. And
if
then,
you're a bit shy, we can also share it directly only with me. That's up to you. But I hope that at least some of you are.
but then in the classroom, you have to come out of that closet finally, right? Like, so it's like the sooner you do it, the better. But like, I don't know, it's up to you. So if others have questions about this process, go ahead. This is the time to ask it. Helena just asked a very good question. If you guys want to, like, if others have questions.
No questions. I feel
Okay,
that
I'll ask a question. Okay, review can be a performance of music. Yes,
yes,
definitely.
absolutely. We are not talking only. No. I mean, in a very ambitious world, in the most ambitious world, we can think about having the two reviews due next week, but I think we can space them out and have, if we commit to writing a positive and a negative text, let's say that one would be next week and the other one the third week. And it doesn't matter to me.
You actually have it on a session 2 and then session 4.
No, session 2 and 3. Session 2 and 3.
That's what I said. Yeah, session 2 and 3.
And we can, in the meantime, we can also discuss what's going to be the subject of the larger piece that is more related to your own practice. We can talk about that on and off classroom if you want, so that starts taking shape, and it's not just the work of 1 week, but the collective that is like cumulatively written throughout these 4 weeks.
Also, a practice that we have so far, and it has worked for us, is that the final project will be due 1 week after the class ends, and probably like all the way Sunday to Monday. So don't think like your 1,000, 1,500 word thing is due on a last Sunday. We usually, like, instructors have agreed to give students 1 weekend, whatever weekend, and then have it due the following Monday. So then you have time to actually sort of like decompress what you picked up in 4 weeks. Have one more week.
I think it would be important to have at least a draft, so that we can, because once you turn the final piece, that's just going to be between you and me. But if we are bringing a draft to the final session, at least there's that moment of collective discussion that can take place.
Okay, so Julieta's requiring you to do a final draft.
I'll type it. So let's say.
Yes. And I copy paste all the text from the sidebar into the classroom too. So this text here will become available in the classroom. We usually do that too. So go ahead, Julieta, you can type it.
That gives us some time to actually be able to talk about why certain choices are being made and how things are being addressed collectively. And at the end we can.
It's a very transparent app, right?
Yeah.
You're aware of what everybody else is doing.
No, but like at the end, of course, like the text, like corrections and things like that, and like the more in-depth analysis is going to be one-on-one, more or less. But it would be nice to be able to have this moment where we are collectively discussing at least topics and drafts. I think discussing between 15 people, like 15 texts of 1,500 words each is a little bit too much for what can be done in 4 weeks. But if we can at least go over the gist of it, it would be very nice, I think.
Santiago, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Well, it's not a question about the homework, rather a question about some things you said, like to pick up on certain things you said, and it was about, I think, direct action, or maybe also what you said about successful art or good art. And one of the things that were mentioned in the syllabus is how we as artists pick up on theory and philosophy to develop our own ideas or to armor them in a way. But I also think, in a way, like how artists would like art to be material for their disciplines in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Philosophy, for I don't know, for cultural politics, for something, or even to matter in a way, in a broader way, or if art matters or not anymore as a cultural commentary or as a zeitgeist of some sort. And if you, Mohammed and Julieta, think that if writing is a way of, again, to make art participate in this public sphere of the political discourse and the power of language, or how the narrative of society is developing.
I mean, I can answer for myself, not for Mo, but what I can say is that yes and no. I mean, what I find concerning is this like absolute reliance on descriptive systems that do not come from art, right? Like, I mean, like, and but as I was like saying this at the beginning, that it's very fascinating to see how texts are shared across disciplines and used very differently. Yeah, like the way that you use the loose in an anthropology classroom is very different to the way in which you use the loose in an art classroom, and what one does to the text, and who feels a responsibility towards the furthering of the text. Yeah. Very often, because of this, I don't know if it is an anxiety about meaning, but I find the relationship of and this is a generalization, of course. I'm not talking about, of course, I'm not talking about ourselves. It's only the bad people. No, kidding. But it's, I mean, like, there is, of course, a tendency of, you know, I mean, like, I have seen, unfortunately, too much of this. Yeah, like reading 3 Xerox pages of what in reality is a 500-page book, and using that to justify a whole series of very bad paintings. And I do not call that armor. I call that crutches. That's and I mean, and I do have a gigantic beef with that. I think that's preposterous, and that's like a predatory scavenging practice. And then, if I want to escape that, and if we want to think that our relationship to language and to the power of text is different, so how does, I mean, like, how does, even if that's not what one does in general, yeah, like I mean, as much text as goes through my hands, for example, I don't write that much. But when, I mean, like, but I do take a certain position towards text, and I maintain a relationship, and I think it's important to think about furthering meaning, not appropriating meaning. About making things, you know, like, and making work more complex, and making meaning by way of the work meaning something, not just arbitrarily assigning it meaning because we think it sounds good. So that's, I mean, like, that's something, I mean, like, I feel that as a kind of like responsibility towards text and towards philosophy, in a sense, and towards becoming subject matter, and towards having this way, I mean, like, because at the end, I mean, like, we're talking about systems of description, and that's implicitly talking about systems of representation. And what one is representing is like how, when we become too enamored of appropriating description systems, we forget that we are trying to represent, and we forget what it is that we're trying to represent, and to present, and to represent, and to imagine, and to reimagine, and so on. If that makes sense.
I'm no authority in this seminar. I'm just like the person who's sort of like taking care of the technical stuff behind the scenes, so Julieta can conduct the seminar. But she actually asked me to be a little bit more active in the first session, so that's why I'm like talking a little bit more, because she invited me almost sort of like to sort of like break the ice of the conversation.
Especially because it's, I mean, like, that's more because this wants to be a hand-on seminar where we are really going over text, and it's very hard to go over the texts that we don't have in front of ourselves. I mean, like, this is like the moment when we are laying groundwork and assigning the topic for our conversations of next week and the week after.
Well, everything will be on the classroom, all the readings, and everything will be on the classroom by tonight maximum first thing tomorrow morning, everything will be on the classroom, and everyone will get the classroom code to access it, download it, and like use like the access the sidebar conversation and all the other stuff that I don't want to repeat. But what I was gonna like the way I wanted to respond to Santiago was that the problem with art being the material and access by other disciplines, the problem I see in that is the fact that in the last, I don't know, in the last 5 or 6 or 7 decades, whatever however you want to stretch it, art has specialized into a type of activity that really, most of the time when people from other fields, especially philosophers, look at it, they get it wrong. It makes me kind of cringe, makes me go like, oh my God, no, please don't talk about art. Because, and it's not their fault either, because it's our fault, because we've created a different genealogy for what we do. We've created a different, like basically like terminology, vocabulary, ways to look at it. And, you know, there's so many historical connections between works that are only accessible if you're trained in this field. And then all of a sudden Rancière arrives, or Graham Harman arrives at something and start talking about things, and you're just saying like, oh my God, what are you talking about? You don't know this thing, and you don't know this thing, and you don't know this thing. What you're saying doesn't make any sense. So this is the problem. And I think we can probably, in a utopian sense, get somewhere when art can be accessed by other disciplines, but maybe not right now, not right this moment, especially the moment we're in right now, because of what I thought already said. I see as like the problem of accessibility of specialized contemporary art by other disciplines.
It's a problem that goes both ways.
Even when one of my favorite mathematicians, like from Colombia, what's his name? Zalamea does it. Sometimes he doesn't get it. Sometimes I feel like, oh my God, Zalamea is putting his foot in his mouth because he doesn't know what he's saying, because he doesn't know the work really well. Yeah, so basically that's what I was going to say. Anyway, so we're out of time because we started like a few minutes late, and now we're ending a few minutes late. So thank you, Andrea. You're very kind. I will be the technical assistant of these 4 sessions anyway, so I'm going to always be around, and I'm a loudmouth, and I always like to talk. So like and because art is my passion and my field too. So I may end up talking, but not as much as today, I promise. And I also promise to Julieta, because this is her class. Anyways, so if people don't have any more questions or concern, maybe we can sort of like end this so I can start the classroom thing going. What do you guys think? Yes?
Okay.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you, Andrea, and thanks for bearing with us, even though your microphone didn't work and we didn't hear you speak.
Yeah, I hope you get set up for next week, and yeah, should be fun. I much look forward to reading.
It was also really beautiful to watch as the sun went down in Berlin from the corner of your, like, because you could see the outside. Yeah, it was kind of beautiful. Anyways, now it's night. Yeah, totally. Anyways, have fun, and see you guys next week, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to stop the broadcast now. Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.